Welcome back to the Warley channel. My name's Richard, I'm the bloke behind Everard Junction, and the channel have asked me if I wouldn't mind doing a little video where I weather one of the club's exclusive 5-plank wagons. And if you want to be within a chance of winning this wagon after I've weathered it, then check out the description of this video. So here's the wagon itself, quite a bit smaller than the stuff I'm used to dealing with, but very nice model nonetheless. The printed detail is particularly good, even the loading information and the return empty information is all legible and you can read everything that is printed onto this wagon. Okay, so let's get started. I'll be weathering this in my usual style, and that is used but not on the scrap heap. It's going to look like it's just in normal revenue traffic on any random day of the week. So I'll pick out the buffer shanks in some silver paint, weather all of the gaps between the planks that make up the wagon in black paint to bring out the detail. We'll then do the underframe, weather the wheels, add muck and grind to the sides of the wagon, and also add a load. Okay, I'm going to give the model a quick clean just to get rid of any grease and contaminants that might be on it. You'll notice I'm also wearing gloves to avoid further contaminating the model after I've cleaned it. The last thing I want is a big thick fingerprint sticking out somewhere on the side of this. Okay, it's now clean. You can see I did pick up some contaminants from it, certainly worth doing. I just used some isopropyl alcohol. It's quite good at dissolving the grease and stuff like that. Alternatively, you can wash this in some warm soapy water if you prefer. Okay, so just weathering the wheels first. So these take a while to dry. I'm just using some Rail Match sleeper grime straight from the tin and a small brush. I'll do some weathering as well on the white detail on the outside of the wheels. Personally, I've never really been a fan of the white treatment on the wheels of railway equipment. It always reminds me of a Soviet military parade, but it is correct for this model and many others, so in the interest of realism I will keep them on. There we go, a little bit of weathering on that. Okay, now we'll do a little bit of buffer detail. This is very easily missed, but it's a nice little bit of detail to add. And if you add it now, then it will get some weathering as you do the rest of the wagon. It'll just take some of the shine off it. Okay, so now I'm just going to give the model a light wash in black. This is just some Vallejo black that I've thinned right down. The wash gets into all the tiny little bits of detail and helps bring them out. It also just dulls the paint slightly of the factory finish on the wagon. This will also take weathering powders and other effects later on a little better. There you can see the effects of the wash a little bit better. You'll notice now the tiny little lines of detail all over the model are now a little bit more picked out as I've washed them in black paint. I'm going to do the same thing inside the model as well. Now this isn't necessary as such because I will be adding a load in here later, but the load will not be right to the brim, so some detail up the sides need to be weathered. Okay, while the black wash is drying, I'm just going to take some more neat black paint and just touch it anywhere on the buffer shanks that I may have got the silver paint a little bit too far. Such a small model, it's very easily done. It really is tiny. There we go. That looks better. Okay, the next thing to do is to give the sides and the underframe of the wagon a light weathering with some rail match roof dirt. It's a nice sort of dark grey colour, very appropriate considering the wagon is carrying coal. If this was a piece of passenger equipment, then perhaps I would use something like sleeper grime, but most of the weathering on a vehicle like this is going to be black or grey due to the nature of the load that it's carrying. So we don't want to go crazy, subtlety is the key. Just a nice gentle bit of weathering. So you can see the underframe there, it's gone all shiny. You know, I've got a covering of paint there. Don't want to do too much. There's a lot of nice little bits of printed detail there. It'd be nice to still have some evidence of those bits. Something else I like to do is if you get the model, doesn't matter what it is, if you get the model at this sort of angle and do a pass or two with the airbrush, then you get the bottom of all of the detail, and you also get the bottom of that lip on the where the side of the wagon meets the chassis of the wagon. And for good measure, we'll also weather the insides a little bit more. The insides are going to be very dirty for obvious reasons. Doing this also ensures that I've got some weathering along the top edge of the wagon. This piece here is easily missed. I'll also do a little bit on the wheels. The sleeper grime has now dried, so just a little bit of grey. Something like that. It's very difficult to tell on camera, but that has made a noticeable difference. Okay, I'm happy with that. That's starting to look the business now. All of the printed detail is still there and it's still legible, including the builder's plates on the underframe. You can still just about see those. The wagon looks like it's a few years old and it's in regular use. It doesn't look like it's ready for the scrap heap or anything like that, which is what I like to try and do with my weathering. So now along the bottom of the vehicle's underframe, I'm just going to do a touch of rail match sleeper grime. This is a little bit more of a brown colour, and this is just to represent a bit of dirt that gets onto the wagon as it is travelling around the country. Okay, so we just want to focus on the underframe, just a couple of passes of sleeper grime. Don't forget to do the ends as well. So there we go, starting to look even better now. I've added a little bit more of the sleeper grime around the handbrake as that bit of metal protrudes a reasonable bit from the rest of the vehicle. It's going to get a slightly different finish on it. You can also see the silver that I added to the shanks of the buffers has now toned down slightly as I've weathered the wagon. So the detail is still there, but now it looks a little bit more convincing. It's not bright, shiny silver. Okay, so that completes most of the general sort of weathering around the wagon. Once it's dried, I'll put the wheels back on and then go ahead and add some extra effects. We need some coal dust streaking down the side of the wagon, and apart from that, it's pretty much ready for a layout. Okay, the wagon has had a chance to dry, so now I'm just going to do some dry brushing. You can see the effect on the top of the wagon running down. Just gives a little bit of extra interest to the weathering effects and that extra layer of realism to represent dirt that's been washed down the side of the wagon. Okay, well that completes the weathering effects on the wagon. You could take things further and do other bits and pieces if you want, but as I'm trying to represent that sort of used in-service look, then that is more than sufficient. To give the wagon some protection against whatever may happen to it in future, I'm just going to give it a quick coat of matte varnish. You would do this if you had used weathering powders to seal everything in, or if you were doing something like a repaint and you wanted to get rid of that sort of glossy finish, then you would also use it. As I have done predominantly painting effects on this model, it could go straight into service on the layout, but just for that little bit of protection I shall give it a coat of matte varnish. Okay, now we'll wait for that to dry, and I will then add the coal load. Okay, the weathering effects have now dried, so now it's time to add a coal load. This is really easy to do and only takes a couple of minutes. Here we have some nice fine pieces of coal. I'll try and create a realistic looking load, nice heap in the middle of the wagon. Got some watered down PVA glue and an eyedropper. It's just a 50-50 mix, a splash of washing up liquid to get rid of the surface tension of the water. And now the paint is dried, I can spray the load. Trying to be reasonably careful. Some settling will occur. That just makes it a little bit easier to put the mix of glue on the wagon. You can see how that soaks in immediately. There's no running. We've got a big air bubble over there. I'll have to sort that out in a minute. Okay, that's now ready to be left to dry. Used a paintbrush and a few tools just to manipulate the load and get it back to looking how I wanted it. When you apply the glue, it's inevitable that you end up with some of it running around the place. So it's important just to take those couple of minutes afterwards just to get it back into shape. The glue's now dried. It takes ages for it to dry. I had to leave the wagon for a few days, but it is now completed. The addition of a coal load has made a massive difference to how the wagon looks. I always prefer loaded wagons as opposed to empties. You can see some of the dry brushing effects streaking down the side of the wagon there as well. The general dusting of coal dust on the body of the wagon and also the underframe, and the light weathering to the wheels and the brake gear. Very small and a little bit difficult to actually work on, also quite difficult to film, just due to its general size, so I apologise if some of the shots aren't always in focus, but it really is quite tiny. So if you'd like to be within a chance of winning this wagon, then check out the description of this video for further instructions. And with that, I shall leave it there. Thank you for watching. Hope you found it enjoyable, useful, perhaps picked up a couple of hints and tips along the way.